We are live on a Thursday, February 20th. Welcome inside the vault for a Ravens Lunch Hour live stream. I'm Bobby Trossett, as always, joined alongside my co-host and partner, Sarah Ellison. We're getting ready for next week's NFL Combine. Looking forward to being out there, having a presence for us out there in Indianapolis. So here's what we have coming up over the course of the next hour or so. Booger McFarland, ESPN analyst, he said the quiet part out loud, if you will, when it comes to the Ravens and some of their woes in January in recent years. We'll have a conversation and react to those comments. Mina Kimes, also an ESPN analyst, had some things to say and really kind of gave the Ravens a direct message, Sarah, when it comes to protecting Lamar Jackson and their offseason priorities that loom ahead of next month's new league year, which begins on March 12th. You're going to take us through what we kind of spent a couple minutes on towards the end of yesterday's live stream with the breaking news related to 2025 salary cap numbers for teams. We'll get into some quick hits. And of course, I'm sure super chats along the way. So happy Thursday to you. We're off and running.
We are off and running. I think it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. And yeah, they did an NFL Live last night on ESPN. And they had they shined the spotlight on the Ravens. It was like their final segment of the show. And their big question of that segment was, do the Ravens need certain players or coaches that need to put them over the top? Or is it just something in their minds? Like, what is it? What is the two? And I think we can start off with maybe with Booger, who talks about how, or maybe we should start with Jeremy Fowler. I don't know which one we should start with, but they are all on the same theme of like, you can add more players, but they still got to get over a certain hump. So maybe Jeremy Fowler is the best one to open that up.
Yeah, I was going to say chronologically, it'd probably be Jeremy. He put together a feature piece on ESPN that made its rounds yesterday, and we'll have a couple different snippets from it, but this would be the first. And again, it has everything to do with the Ravens' shortcomings in the month of January.
The league's best offense led by two-time MVP Lamar Jackson. Why have the Ravens come up short of the Super Bowl the past 2 seasons? Baltimore's core issue is this: it doesn't play its best football in January.
They dropped the ball. Third turnover by the Ravens.
The Ravens are 3-5 in the playoffs with Jackson under center, and in this year's divisional round, outplayed the Buffalo Bills and lost thanks to 3 turnovers. This was uncharacteristic for a team that turned it over just once over the previous month. So what changes? People with Baltimore that I've spoken to swear the team doesn't play tight in the playoffs. But necessary improvements this offseason could make January's success more attainable.
At the moment time, it's like it's not going our way. We need to figure that out.
Okay.
Sarah, you've got essentially him sharing and relaying conversations he's had with folks within the Ravens building that are standing tall, right? In terms of nobody tightens up. It's an execution thing or whatever that might be. Yet you've got Josina Anderson telling me, as we've recounted several times since New Orleans, that she questions the pressure management side of things. Femi didn't do that as much yesterday, I thought, as a former player's perspective.
No, he took that idea down.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And so that kind of now brings us to what Booger had to say.
Well, just to recap a few of those lines in there to be very clear about what he's saying. So he is saying out loud that the Ravens do not play their best football in January. And this isn't just a 1 or 2 year thing. This has been going on since, maybe you could say 2018, 2019 for sure, after you went 14-2. Another thing I want to point out that he did here, which I appreciate, is he said the Ravens don't play their best football in January. In the past, it's always been Lamar Jackson doesn't. And I think that the way Lamar played against the Steelers and the way he played in the second half against the Bills forces them to say, okay, it's not just a Lamar thing, it's a Ravens thing. So I appreciate that they're acknowledging that it's more than Lamar Jackson. Now, the one thing, and this is where I feel like our headline kind of comes in, where he and the media have been saying the quiet part out loud. He says, after talking to people in the building, they swear that they don't play tight. Myles Garrett said differently. Remember Myles Garrett when he was talking to Louis Riddick before the Ravens-Browns game at the end of the season? He's like, man, there are times they're playing so loose. He's like, Lamar will be hit at the bottom of a pile and he'll be laughing. He's like, what's this dude laughing? But then he talks about how they shoot themselves in the foot and all of a sudden they play tight. So their biggest opponent, their perhaps their toughest defender in the division, if not the league, says differently. And Lamar Jackson, at least a while ago, would say the quiet part. He said the quiet part out loud. He said, I used to play a little antsy, right? And then he said, that's behind me. And then he proved that was behind him in those 2 playoff games, even though he did have those early missteps in the Bills game. But in that second half, he proved that antsiness is behind him. So this is a Ravens thing. So they're swearing they don't play tight. Bobby, this can't be a luck thing all these years in a row, because even luck will bounce your way at some point from 2019 to 2025. It's like he said, 3 turnovers when you had very few throughout 17 games. So he says the Ravens are swearing that they don't play tight. I'm seeing something different, and so is Booger.
Completely concur, Lewis, especially when it comes to the secondary. I think the secondary could be better. They need to make sure they're better on the outside. I like Marlon Humphrey when he's inside playing the nickel and not on the outside. They need another impact play up front. But the bottom line is this, is that when you get in these playoff games, you have to play your best. It's amazing how Baltimore's best players continue to come up the smallest in the biggest games. And I don't know whether that's mindset or whether these players are starting to put too much on it. Even you go back a couple years ago, they didn't run the football. They got away from their identity. So it's not just a player thing. It's a coaching thing also. How come this organization can't just say, you know what, I get it's the playoffs, but let's just go out and continue to play football the way we played all year. It's almost as if they put too much emphasis on the playoffs, and it gets into the entire organization's head, not just the players, but the coaches also.
Bobby, I like that in that one he called out two main people, 2 groups of people. He didn't just say the players, but he said the best players. Which again is true. Again, just the first half for Lamar Jackson against the Bills, but 1.5 games where he was sensational. Mark Andrews, obviously.
When it mattered most, he was super productive leading up to it, which is unfortunate. But when it mattered most, and then, of course, Zay in the AFC Championship game.
Exactly. And so he points that out. But he also pointed out the coaching, which does not happen a lot in national media. You see it more on the local level. Absolutely. And then he brought up that AFC Championship game again, which was absolutely lots of people to blame, but I put the coaching number 1 on that list for getting away from what they do best. I thought the coaches panicked in that game by abandoning the run way too early. They did not do that against the Bills. And I put it more on execution with, as he's saying, the best players playing the smallest and the biggest games. But I like that he pointed out both groups. And then we'll finish up with Ryan Clark seeing something similar.
No, absolutely. And I think Kyle Hamilton was on with Mina Kimes, and he said the exact thing. Like, we don't need nothing else. The fact that we continue to get here, the fact that you dominate in the regular season, that you are the kings of the AFC North, you've had the number 1 seed, you've had the number 1 defense, you've had the number 1 offense, but you keep falling short. That's a you issue. That's a you problem. That's an execution problem. That's a making the moment too big problem. And now, no matter what happens throughout the regular season, I believe us on the outside as the media, the fans, the people who watch the game, we understand it doesn't matter until the playoffs. I believe the Baltimore Ravens players have that in their head as well. And when Lamar Jackson throws an early pick, or when he drops the football on a DeMar Hamlin sack, I think they immediately jump into not again. And you know this, Booger, you know this, Lewis, having played, you can't be in not again mode in the playoffs, because that'll have you sitting on your couch watching the next weekend.
So all 3 of them, he brought up, Bobby, Kyle Hamilton. And he said that Kyle Hamilton, let's get out the exact quote, because again, the Ravens are stopping just short of saying what everybody in the media is saying. So when Kyle Hamilton was on with Mina Kimes, he said, I've had so many people ask me what the Ravens are missing. I'm like literally Nothing. We have everything you want to win a championship. It's just we haven't been playing well when we got to the point that we need to win. There's no excuses for that. It's just offense, defense, special teams, and we have to do better. So it's like they know they're not playing their best football in January. And Bobby, here's a question I have that I was kind of thinking about where, they're all saying that they're not playing, too tight, or Ryan Clark bringing up the idea of what if a mistake happens, they're like, oh crap, not again. And so you start to get nervous that it's like the history will play out all over again. And I'm just wondering, how like during the last 2 seasons, and you don't want to go too far with this, but the last 2 seasons, after great wins during the regular season, because of the playoffs and what has happened, it's like nobody can enjoy it. Fans included. Like the Ravens can go out and soundly beat the Steelers, who is a divisional foe. Or you beat the Bengals and have this incredible consecutive record of beating them, right? You swept the Steelers. Or whoever you beat.
You swept Cincy.
Yeah, I meant to say Cincy. Thank you for correcting me. And it's like, on one end, you don't want to celebrate it like it's the Super Bowl. You don't want to do that. But it's like every time something good happens during the regular season, other football fans have shamed Ravens fans into not celebrating it or enjoying it. And then the Ravens themselves are like, oh, well. And like, I get that to a certain point, right? Like they know what the mission is. They've done this a million times. They've had regular season success, but I'm just wondering if it will help with what I see is playing too tight, even though Jeremy Fowler's saying the organization is swearing that they're not playing tight. Well, they're not playing loose. They're not playing like they normally do in these big games. They've had a couple games where they have, like the Texans and the Steelers, but it's like you are not even enjoying the moment anymore. No, like it's to the point where Ravens fans were yelling at me in the beginning of the season, not at the end, of like, Sarah, stop talking about MVP. Why? I want to enjoy it. I want to enjoy that Lamar Jackson is playing at an MVP level for the 3rd time, right? Like I want to enjoy that they're AFC North champs again. And I just wonder if you can't find joy throughout the regular season, is that adding to the pressure once they get to the regular season because they've never been loose? You know what I mean? It's just like, enjoy the season, enjoy the success. And when the playoffs come, they come, but enjoy the journey while you're on it. What do you think about that?
Well, you're making me think of every single Lamar Jackson press conference after as notable of a win as there was week in and week out. It felt like down the stretch, he had that Mamba mentality at the press conference, which was great. We all appreciated that, right? It was like the defiant Lamar. He's got the bigger fish to fry. But, it begs the question, and this is maybe what you're alluding to, was there enough, enjoyment? They call it the 24-hour window, either when you flush it throughout that time, if it's a loss, you flush it you have to flush it regardless. You're either enjoying those 24 hours or you're not. And so, yeah, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up. But Ryan's comments made me think about something else. It's not all that different. And it's something that the Ravens have been able to overcome that they were labeled as. And we know all the labels that Lamar's Ravens have had throughout his 7 seasons. There's been many that have been attached to them, some of which have been deserved, some of which not so much. One that was definitely deserved years ago now. Can they win when they're punched in the mouth first? Can they come back from early deficits? Can they stick to their identity when they have to come back from early deficits? And for a while, if the Ravens didn't strike first, if the Ravens didn't set the tone from the jump, we saw time and time again, we're talking years ago at this point, but there was legitimate questions as to whether or not they were built to come back from deficits. It's almost like when Ryan said, here we go again mode, or something, paraphrasing.
Not again mode.
Not again mode. If that's a legitimate psychological thing that happens to them, that does lead to tightening up, that does lead to a lack of execution, that does lead to a lack of polish, it's almost like they need to overcome that again re-overcome it just in the month of January. It's like a reset that's needed. Problem is, I have no idea how you properly go about that reset.
Well, right. And that's why I'm saying, in part, can you just enjoy the ride?
Maybe
you know
that's one step towards doing so.
And that's what people say. They take it out of football. Like everybody always says, it's not the destination, it's the journey, right? And so, like, part of that is enjoying the journey. And so, the last couple years they've tried it this way, where like they're not enjoying the journey, where it's like you're so locked in that like a big win means nothing, and that hasn't worked for you. Because it has gotten to the playoffs, and they, to me, have gotten too tight. Because what other explanation is there, right? You're completely playing out of character in those big playoff games. And again, not the first round, whether it's the wild card or the divisional, but it's always that second game. I don't think that the Ravens have ever won multiple playoff games in the same season. And so, not enjoying the ride hasn't worked. So why not enjoy it? Now, I'm not saying go out and celebrate it like the Super Bowl. Okay, I remember the Vikings with Sam Darnold, like they were popping champagne and in the locker room. I can't remember what week it was, if it was week 17 or 18. I'm like, okay, we don't need to go that far, but we can smile. You know what I mean? Like we can enjoy the moment. And so, something's got to give. Something's got to give, because they're not playing like themselves, and it can't just be that the ball didn't bounce your way, every year since 2019.
Well, if they want to be back in that position, at least for a chance to change things around, obviously free agency and the way that they team build from a front office perspective in the coming weeks will be paramount. And that leads us to the second snippet from Jeremy Fowler's latest on that ESPN feature that was released last night. And in this case, I would love to get your thought on this too, because, and maybe we'll discuss it on the back end, but I'll let you digest the question before I play it. And that is this: do you feel that this is opinion-based content from Jeremy, or is it a mixture of opinion and also reporting based on conversations that he's had in the building? We'll answer that after this.
The defense could use at least one playmaker, particularly in the secondary, which struggled early in the season. The offense needs a vertical receiving threat to complement Zay Flowers, and re-signing left tackle Ronnie Stanley is a priority. Regardless, Baltimore is positioned to capitalize on Jackson's prime with an overdue breakthrough.
So the quote, as you see on the screen, the defense could use at least one playmaker, particularly in the secondary. The offense needs a vertical receiving threat to complement Zay Flowers. And re-signing left tackle Ronnie Stanley is a priority. How would you answer that question that I posed a second ago?
I took it as reporting, and I know we split it apart with his first segment, because it fit with the whole idea of like, are the Ravens playing too tight and what they're doing in January. But when he said that he had, people in the building swear this, and then he kind of transitioned into what they need. And Jeremy Fowler has always been a reporter, not necessarily an opinion guy. And when they put that package together, it seemed to me that he had done some reporting. So I could be wrong, but that was certainly my impression. And I also keep that impression because I think he's right. I don't think he's making this up. So
I would agree with your interpretation, by the way.
Okay. So we're on the same page there. So let's kind of break this down. Let's do this. Let's first hone in on this Ronnie Stanley part in offensive line. So he said, and we'll go with that first because he specifically said, signing left tackle Ronnie Stanley is a priority. That fits in really well with what Mina Kimes said on her show about what the Ravens need to do with their the left side of their offensive line with Ronnie Stanley and Patrick McCary, who are both unrestricted free agents. Mina is sending a message. I don't know if they need the message or if they've already gotten it, but here is a message to the Ravens about that offensive line in order to protect Lamar Jackson.
Chance the Ravens are similar to the Chiefs. I think there's a good chance that they get priced out of the Ronnie Stanley market. I am not sure that's a great decision, though. If both him and because you got McCary also, who was guard, leaving, that's a little bit more change on the offensive line that I'm comfortable with for them. I think the Ravens should bring back one of Stanley or McCary. I don't like the idea of like them just saying, hey, we've got Lamar, it's going to be fine.
This fan base is going to appreciate the last part of that quote right there. But I think the Ravens should bring back one of Ronnie Stanley or Patrick McCary is the first part of that. And then she goes on to say, I don't like the idea of them just saying, hey, we got Lamar. It's going to be fine. And Sarah, let me just add this in as well, because it was a long segment and I did a little bit of editing to clean it up for the show.
Okay.
Within that same piece, within that same topic, Mina went on to acknowledge that after she started to look at a few of the left tackle needy teams, if you will, she did acknowledge that there isn't a whole lot of like, quote, obvious destinations as she maybe thought of at the beginning part of that clip, and went on to say that maybe, just maybe, Baltimore could get a reasonable market for Ronnie. So just wanted to add that in there. But clearly we want to focus in on the end of this quote, which is obviously refreshing and also pressing.
Well, just to be, if you could clarify for me, when you said there's no obvious destinations, you mean she's saying there's no obvious suitors for Ronnie Stanley?
Fit-wise, as she's looking around the league, teams that are left tackle needy, she would at the beginning, she's like, oh, there's going to be a market. And Kevin Clark, her co-host for this episode, was like, oh, he's, they both agreed he's going to price himself out of Baltimore. And then the segment continued, and she started like thinking out loud, like Kevin mentioned the New England Patriots as a possible destination. Okay. And they went back and forth on that. So the long story short is she went from saying those comments to, oh, you know what? There aren't as many obvious destinations that would be a good fit for Ronnie, not necessarily the interest portion of it. Does that clear that up?
Yep. Well, it makes me want to go listen to some more of why they took out other teams, because to me, it's like who isn't looking for? Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, Trey is expected to leave in free agency. Exactly. So that's the team that's going to be floating around.
Stanley protecting Patrick Mahomes when he could be protecting Lamar Jackson. Like, to me, if what Fowler is saying is indeed a report, and Ronnie Stanley is a priority, then you go about this in the opposite way that you are doing it with Brandon Stevens, which Eric DaCosta said, we're gonna let Brandon go check out the market. Okay. I do not want, if you are serious about re-signing Ronnie Stanley, you do not let him sniff the market. You don't do it.
Yep.
And I don't know where Ronnie's head is at. I would love to interview him, even though he's not going to tell us. But I'm curious where his head's at when he took a pay cut, not a restructure, not an extension, a pay cut, and lost, and just let them have millions of dollars. And he needed to, because he was coming off of those injuries. He had no market. There wasn't going to be a market for him. He knew it was like a do or die year. And then he came in, he stayed healthy all 18 games, also 18 weeks, 17 games. And he had a comeback year. He was definitely the comeback player of the Ravens, and nobody would ever give it to an offensive lineman, but I would think he'd be in the running if they actually considered offensive linemen across the league. And so I'm curious where he is, where he's like, remember all those millions I gave back to you?
Yeah.
And he, by the way, he almost made it back, because if he had made a Pro Bowl, it would have been the incentives to get it back. And he did eventually go to the Pro Bowl, but as a backup. And the incentive specifically was that you had to be first team, Pro Bowler, not an alternate. So I'm curious if he's like, no, I got to go out and recoup the money I lost and realize that I did have a big major payday, but I could have another one. And this is for sure going to be my last one. And so, or is he thinking, I have unfinished business with Lamar Jackson, who I've been protecting my entire career, and we are so close. Like, I don't know, but he could be close if he hit the market and went and signed with Kansas City Chiefs. Like,
he might be closer. He could dang well be closer, Sarah, couldn't he? I hate to say it, but history unfortunately begs the question on that one.
And let's look at this. Let me share my screen here real quick from Spot Rack. So they have him. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. There we go. Their market value for Ronnie is $20.7 million average annual.
Yep.
So they're saying 2 years, $41 million. Ooh, Woo-wee. I mean, he's not cheap. Left tackles aren't cheap. But to Mina's point, it's Lamar Jackson. He's your franchise. And do you really want to take the risk of seeing if Roger Rosengarten can move to the left? So then you're like, it's an unknown. You feel pretty good based off of what he did his rookie year and how quickly he acclimated to the NFL. But then in his second year, you're asking him to move over to left tackle, and then you still have an unknown at right tackle. So now you have an unknown at both tackle positions if you move him over, and who knows who's going to take over that right tackle spot. And you don't know who your left guard is going to be.
Right. Instead of being like, hey, we know in our heart of hearts that Roger is going to be our left tackle of the future. But why should the future start now if we feel really good about a couple more years with Ronnie? We still feel like we're in this Super Bowl window right now. We want Roger to continue building his confidence up and stabilizing the right-hand side of the line. We'll go draft another guard, like we hope
or Voorhees, one of those two likely, right?
Oh, well, I think both can happen, right? Voorhees can start day one and they'll still probably draft a guard for depth.
Yeah.
Because Ben's not coming back. You can't expect that to happen.
Ben is not coming back.
Especially not in recent days.
Even before recent days, he was not coming back. But
for sure. That was the icing on the cake, if you will. But so I guess that really becomes the question, how bad, and you're right. Ronnie's as buttoned up as anybody. I would love to know where his mind is, because those two scenarios that you played out, it's got to be one of the two.
Right. And by the way, if you don't pay this to him, okay, well, then you've got a very cheap left tackle in Roger Rosengarten, because he's a second round tackle.
Yeah.
So he'll be very cheap. But then are you going to pay for a right tackle? And how much are you going to pay for that? And so this is a predicament. It actually brought me a little bit of peace that Fowler, and again, it felt like he was reporting it. I could be wrong. But if he indeed was talking to somebody in the building and they said Ronnie Stanley's a priority, that actually brought me, because I just don't see a better scenario than Ronnie and Roger as the two bookends that's available to the Ravens. Like to expect the Ravens to draft another right tackle and just have him come in right away. I mean, it's possible. Maybe you could do that with your first round pick. But generally speaking, that like what Roger just did is very rare. Very rare to find a starting tackle in the late second round. That is rare.
Yeah. You'd be taking the gamble too if you went and shifted Roger to left tackle, of course, for reasons that we've already discussed with that transition. Now people do forget that, remember, he was the blindside protector of Michael Penix at Washington. Michael is a left-hand throwing quarterback. So while he was playing right tackle, he was serving, obviously, left tackle duties, if you will. And then prior to that, both at earlier in in his career and then in high school, as we learned from Tyler Columbus, the former Denver Bronco, who came on our show after Roger was drafted last year. He had plenty of experience at left tackle. But where I'm going with the gamble is, sure, you're gambling on Roger, even though you feel confident in him in the future at left tackle. But you'd also be gambling,
like you said.
Right. But you'd also be taking a gamble on what, like you said, whether it be through the draft or you go and find a Morgan Moses-esque free agency signing, as you did a few years ago, to serve as right tackle for the next couple of years. And while Morgan was more than serviceable towards the end, he was starting to drop off availability wise for you. So he ended up going to New York, and I believe he's actually, ironically, I believe Morgan's is set to hit free agency and the Jets aren't bringing him back. So that's another scenario. I'm not talking about Morgan. I'm talking about a similar player.
Right. I know what you're saying. Yeah. So this kind of brings us, Bobby. So yesterday at the very end of the show, we saw Dan Graziano report that the new projected cap would be between $277.5 million to $281.5 million, which is about $5 to $9 million more than what we've kind of been working with as a projection from Booger McFarland. Now, with that extra money, it's certainly good news. And as Ken McCusick pointed out, who's like a data analyst king, right? He's just all about the numbers. He says that new projected cap benefits teams with minimal salary cap space.
Yeah.
And that makes sense, right? Like if we were to give $100 to an adult with a job, it certainly means something. But if I gave it to my 7-year-old daughter, it's like, holy moly, I'm rich, right? Like it makes a big difference when you're going from like 0 to 100. Not as big of a deal if you're like, I don't know, say like you make 50 grand a year, $100 is awesome. But if you're a millionaire and you get $100, it's like, oh, that's nice. Yeah. But whatever, you know what I mean? Yep. And so it's certainly going to, everybody will get the extra money, but the teams that are tightest against the cap, it's obviously the most beneficial. So as Ken goes on to say, he says at the midpoint of the range, the Ravens have approximately 10 million. So let's actually get into, let's go to Booger McFarland, who updated his salary cap summary based on these new projections. So he put in the middle range, which is what he did before. So if the range is 277 to 281, he's now saying, okay, let's estimate that it's 279.5.
Okay.
Okay. And with that, he now says the Ravens are they have 12.7 million in cap space. And before it was just under 6 million. So it's almost doubled. Okay. So that's a big deal. That will help the Ravens. We're talking about Ronnie Stanley. We're talking about McCary. We're talking about all the needs that will help. However, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself. So Brian says there are a lot of other factors that are still to come, even though the Ravens have 2.7 million. He said they still have to put in their incentives adjustments. So based off of all the guys that hit their incentives last year, like Kyle Van Noy, remember he was doing that money dance after he hit his sacks incentive. Okay. He said, so the Ravens, that already takes up almost 3 million. Almost 3 million of the 13 you have here. So now you're back down to 10. Then he says you have to tender Ardarius Washington. You're going to have to use a second round tender. That's going to be 5.3 million. So now you're back down to 5 million. He says the rule of 51, I'm not going to explain that. Rule of 51 offset of 1.68 million when Stanley and Aguilar's deals void, if not re-signed before cap because they had void years. He said that will all, just those 3 things, Bobby. We haven't even gotten to the draft picks.
Yeah.
The 11-man draft class, which may end up being 10 or 9 or who knows what they do. He says that will already eat up most of the cap space. Like just those 3 things. It's back down to 0. Now, if you didn't have that extra 6 million, you'd still have to find that somewhere. So at least it takes care of those things and you can start from scratch again. The moral of the story is it certainly helps, but is it going to get you the 20 million a year for Ronnie Stanley? No. And it's going to be hard to backload some of that because Lamar Jackson's contract is already backloaded. We know it's going to be 75 million over the next 2 years. And so the Ravens are still going to find themselves in a crunch and they're still going to have to make big moves, which we talked about yesterday. Extend Lamar Jackson and or trade Mark Andrews. And then you got all those other extensions, which will get you 3 million here, 4 million there, 5 million there. But it's the significant cap space is within Lamar and Mark Andrews.
Extensions, or part ways with 89. Goodness gracious. All right.
Bobby, here's what I wanted to do real quick. I know we talked about this beforehand. So here's what Jeremy Fowler said. What if we go 1 through 5? Let's prioritize our needs for the Ravens. Okay. We'll start number 1 for each of us. You want to go first? What's your number 1 priority and needs?
So needs, which we always like to remind everybody, this is not necessarily what we think the order is going to be off the top of the draft.
Right. That's different. No, because what the Ravens traditionally try to do is address all their needs, maybe not with all the greatest players ever, but address their glaring needs so that when they go into the draft, they're not reaching.
Okay.
So I think they'll address a lot of this stuff. But what's your number 1 need?
Okay. So with that in mind, I'd probably go, being that Ronnie is about to hit the free agency market, and while Fowler is reporting we think him as a priority, he will be unsigned at the start of the new league year. So until they make a decision on that. So I think one has to be tackle.
I'm right there with you. Offensive
Top
tackle
priority is
number
tackle.
Yes.
Yep. The
Yeah.
future of the tackle position.
Got to protect Lamar.
Yep. You have one of the two under contract, a rookie contract at that for the next several years. And we've already spoken about him at length in Roger. So top priority for me is a tackle. And then you as well. We're going to go back and forth and you just agreed.
Yes, I agreed.
Okay.
It's offensive tackle. So you want me to go number 2?
Yep.
Okay. My number 2 is cornerback. We saw teams target Brandon Stevens. And listen to all the other guys they had on. This is why defense, it needs to be a full team effort. It's all 11 dudes. Because you had Kyle Hamilton out there. Ardarius Washington came in and played strong. You had Marlon Humphrey leading all corners with interceptions over the entire league. Nate Wiggins stepping up as a rookie corner, showing that he belongs in the NFL. And what do teams do? Oh, let's go get that dude, the dude who has the name Stevens on the back of his jersey. And he's either going to give us a defensive pass interference or he's going to just let a big play go. Like they're going to let him walk. So who are you going to replace him with? Because it can't be another weak link. You can't let one cornerback be the guy that they're like, cool, you got Wiggins, you got Kyle Hamilton, you got all these dudes, you got all of them. But I'm just going to go target this dude over here. So that is why number 2, my priority is cornerback. And maybe TJ Tampa will be that guy. I just don't know yet. And they know better than me. But if Jeremy Fowler is reporting based off of what he talked to, he says, particularly in the secondary, they need a playmaker on defense.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why I put that there, because there's legitimately a hole there that I don't know who's going to fill it.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense. Hard to argue with the need for playmaking addition. And obviously at some point throughout the draft or free agency, they're bringing in another corner. We know that as much. I'm going to throw some stock in one of Baltimore's finest, and his words from earlier this week. And that was Mel Kiper, who went out of his way to sing the praises of second-year corner out of Iowa State and their former 4th rounder, Sarah TJ Tampa. And I'm going to go edge rusher at 2.
Okay.
I think Mel's been having some conversations in there. I think they like TJ. I think that his rookie season really was derailed for reasons that we've covered at length, and certainly earlier this week with that double sports hernia surgery that just he was behind from the jump, and they had plenty of guys in front of him. So I'll go edge rusher, and we got into it earlier this week. They've got guys, they've got names, but they don't have that needle-moving player who's going to show up in game wreck in January. And for that reason, edge rusher for me will be number 2.
Yeah, edge rusher for me is – go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go to my 3, so go ahead.
Well, it just is easy to play off of it. Edge rusher is my number 3.
Okay.
And listen, I've been here, pounding the table for that game record, right? And I still feel that way. I'm not saying don't go get this, but I put it number 3. And I think I probably do because you have faith in TJ Tampa, and I'm not saying I don't have faith. I just don't know. So it looks like a hole to me, right? Like, whereas I know that Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe just put up double-digit snaps. Like, I know they just did that. And I feel good about them repeating that. Whereas, like, I'd have to, it's a little bit more faith in TJ Tampa because I've never seen it. And so that looks like a hole to me. Whereas, like, with the edge rushers, I'm just trying to add a game record on top of a solid base. And I don't know that there's a solid base opposite of Nate Wiggins. So that's why I put pass rusher number 3. But I think we're close here because I think we just flipped him. Unless, what's your number 3?
No. I hear you. I'm putting big stock in Mel's analysis here.
Yeah.
TJ really has only played. I think I mentioned the snap count numbers earlier this year. It was like less than 20 defense, and I think like a little over 100 or just below 100 special team snaps. So he's very, very much unknown. I'm going with Mel there, though, solely based on, you're right, KVN and Odafe have brought it in the regular season, but they have not consistently in the month of January, and that's what shifted me in the other direction. I'm actually going to surprise you on this one. I'm going to go wide receiver 3. I want more depth at that position. So I'm going the third.
You still haven't gotten a corner.
I have not. That's
You're
it's
addressing
coming.
wide receiver 3 before CB2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, CB3. Or you're putting Marlon.
No, CB3 is more of like nickel. I'm like, to me, the two outsides are CB1 and 2.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But I hear what you're saying. You do have Marlon and Wiggins.
Yes, I am. I am doing that. I'm going wide receiver at third for reasons that we've talked about time and time again, and it reared its ugly head. Now, in that 90-yard drive that Lamar executed, yes, he did so with Anthony Miller and Tylan Wallace, and that was exceptional. But is that sustainable?
No.
And is that feasible? No, I don't believe so. And so I'm not going to go as far as to, and I don't think Jeremy did this intentionally, but I'm not going to slight Rashad and say that they need somebody to complement Zay. I just want some legitimate depth at wide receiver 3, and I'd be happy if that player came through free agency or another swing on day 2 or even day 3 if you really truly. Now, actually, let me back up for a quick second. From what I've learned, and you and I have started to kind of sink our teeth into draft analysis and consume as much content as we can now that we've shifted gears. This is not a deep class. This is not that sexy of a class at wide receiver. So let me just say this. How about through free agency, you find a legitimate wide receiver 3 that can give you that depth that you did not have this past January? I'll go that as my third need.
Yeah. I still like the idea of Amari Cooper there as a potential wide receiver 3. The reason why I don't put that as high on a list, and Femi talked about this yesterday, is that if it's, I'll say this, if the Ravens do trade Mark Andrews, wide receiver 3 will move up on my list. But because they do so many, they've got Likely and Andrews and then Kolar, and I know that they lean into the tight ends, it makes wide receiver 3 less valuable because he just doesn't see the field as often. But I hear you on the depth part of it for sure, which is why I was pounding the table last year of getting depth behind after they signed Rashad Bateman. So I hear you on that. But to me, wide receiver 3 will rise if they do indeed move on from Mark Andrews. My fourth biggest need is offensive guard. Again, they're losing Patrick McCary. I don't know what they think of Andrew Voorhees. I mean, he started at left guard at the beginning of the year, and then they were like, yoink, and just never came back.
He got banged up, though, right? He got banged up first. I thought it was injury-wise at first. I if memory serves, I thought injuries played a part.
I'll go back and look. You might be right. But he never got it back. That's for sure. And it's not like McCary. I mean, he was solid, but it's not like he was like playing out of this world. It's not like one of those things where it's like, dang, I wanted to get my guy back in, but he was playing so well, I just couldn't justify it. You know what I mean? So chat saying Voorhees did get hurt. So I don't know. I don't know if once he got healthy, if like they really liked what McCary was doing, or if they just felt like Voorhees wasn't at that level yet, or maybe they just didn't want to mess with the chemistry. So I am interested in seeing where Voorhees is, but I would like them to draft a guard, and you can get a great guard, right, in day 2, and really have a guy that's like legit, certainly legit. And it just felt like the Ravens weren't able to run very well behind the left guard position. So I have offensive guard there since you're losing the starter.
Okay. Let's see. Fourth for me is cornerback, which you've already, I'll echo the comments that you eloquently stated a couple minutes ago. And that brings me to my fifth, which is inside linebacker. That cracks my top 5. Yeah. Malik Harrison is set to hit free agency. We know that he and Chris Board essentially split time after Trenton in certain format. I mean, obviously it depended on what was going on, run versus pass and whatnot. Malik handled the run a lot of times. But when Trenton was demoted, that's essentially the rotation that they went with out of desperation, or just at that time, that's what they needed to do to keep the middle part of the field intact. We know that Roquan is coming off, even despite a slow start, because a lot of this jostling roster-wise, he coming off an all-pro season yet again. And so while the hope is that Trenton can have a big-time jump as other players have as late bloomers, if you will, being that this will only be his third season and second as a starter if he earns the job, I think that, bringing some youth in or bringing in a veteran would serve them well. So that rounds out, I should say, my top 5.
Yeah, I would definitely think that it would be a veteran there behind, because my guess is they're right. They got rid of their inside linebackers coach, which is kind of an indictment on, hey, you got to help develop Simpson, who we drafted years ago to replace Patrick Queen. That clearly was the plan that they put in place. And he has all the measurables and the talent, but it wasn't developed. So them moving on from their inside linebacker coach tells me that they think in part they're not putting it all on Trenton. They're putting it on the coaching staff, not developing him. So my guess is they're going to be going into OTAs and mini camp and training camp with the idea of, we are developing our draft pick who's going into his 3rd year, and we'll bring in insurance with a veteran behind him. So because of that, it doesn't crack my top 5. Okay. I don't see the insurance behind Simpson as a top 5 need. Instead, I think it's safety, because I think safety, legitimately, another safety will get on the field quite a bit, because as much as Pagano made it sound like he kind of likes the idea of leaving Hamilton just as a safety. And yet at the same time, even if they do that more often, they're not going to completely want to go away from using him as a chess piece and moving him around. Now, as Pagano said, you don't want to abuse that ability that he has.
Yeah.
Right. And put too much on his plate to the point where he's not playing just sensational at, one spot, but playing, very, very good at many spots. So I think they do want to move him around. Maybe they do it less, but I think that third safety will get on the field more than an insurance policy inside linebacker. So that's why I put it as number 5.
I hear you. Obviously, that brings us to the honorable mention level. So for me, it would be in no specific order: guard and safety, obviously. Though, so
for me, it could be kicker. That's TBD.
Oh,
that's TBD.
Yeah. Oh man, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, there's still so much more to come on that.
Right now, it's not a need because he's still on the team.
Yeah.
But we all know, depending on an investigation, we don't know what they're going to find. But if an investigation lends credibility and the Ravens find that they're, and why I have a clothespin in my hand this entire time, I don't know, but it's been on my table and it's fine to play with. I
always keep something in my hand too. We're fidgety people,
I just noticed that I keep lifting up a clothespin. But so if there's an investigation and they feel like, what is it up to, 16
allegations, 16 massage therapists, both past and present.
Yeah. So he denies it all. They're going to do an investigation. If the investigation says to them, this is credible and they want to move on, then suddenly kicker jumps way up high on this list.
Oh, it jumps. It skyrockets. It balloons into the top 5. I mean, that's sort of the umbrella. That's interesting you bring that up. That's kind of like the umbrella over the top 5 right now, because to your point, it's just unsettled.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see. Good stuff. Let us know what your top 5 priorities are, needs are for the Ravens this offseason in the comment section in the chat. We'd love to hear from them, and we appreciate you guys for being here on this Thursday. Let's get to some super chats and quick hits. Tila, we've got just south of 3,000 concurrents right now. If you could please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of when we're dropping our daily live content. We would really appreciate it. Let's see. Oh, what's this? Log Junior 50. This is a new super chat donor. Log Junior 50 says, bring in Mekhi Becton. He's 6'7", 368 to play left guard at a cheaper money than McCary, and pairing him with Daniel Fa'alele, 6'8", 380. It'd be a dream. And re-sign Ronnie. Doesn't matter the money. Did we not learn anything from the Super Bowl? Offensive line matters. Appreciate you for the $20 spot.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a quick point here. Spot rack is not the end all be all, okay? And I've seen them overvalue players all the time, but Spot Rack has McCary and Mekhi Becton essentially having the exact same market, just over 10 million per year.
Yeah. And Dreams, Queon.
Atlanta has only 4 picks in this year's draft: 1st, 2nd, 4th, 7th. Baltimore has 11. So why not trade with them if Mike Green is still on the board? Where is Atlanta right now?
Let's see.
Look this up.
Let's see here. Where are you, Atlanta? And how do you only have 4? Oh, I know. You had to go get Michael Penix. All right. Let's see. Atlanta is 15th.
You know what just popped up for me, Bobby, out of nowhere?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I did this. You know, Daniel Jeremiah has his Zoom conference call.
Yes.
I was clicked on the link yesterday because I couldn't remember what time it was. So apparently I've been waiting in the waiting room this whole time. Oh. And so it just popped up. And I'm now in the Zoom call with Daniel Jeremiah.
What time does that start?
It starts at 1, I think.
Okay, and we have a 1:30 meeting. I just remembered too, so we gotta get through this quickly. But Atlanta is at.
I see a lot of Baltimore people in here. Jonas Schaefer has his hand up. Ryan Mink has his hand up.
Love it.
We'll
unfortunately,
have to check in on that.
I was gonna say, unfortunately, I'm gonna be. Looks like we're gonna be watching that back through with the file that they send. But anyway, Atlanta is at 15. Appreciate you, Dreams. And another one from Queon says a day 3 sleeper is Xavier Truss, a real big truss. LOL. How about that?
Sorry, real quick. Where is Atlanta?
Atlanta's at 15.
Okay. That could work.
Ravens are at 27, of course. Appreciate you, Queon. Looking at those day 3 picks, which brings us to quick hits. And speaking of wide receivers, Jeff Zarebeck and others tweeting this out yesterday that according to the league's personnel notice, the Ravens re-signed veteran Keith Kirkwood, who spent last year on the practice squad, and they did the same with Anthony Miller, who was called up, as we all know, was called up for the postseason because of the injury to Zay Flowers. So 2 guys that they're going to have within their arsenal, Sarah, emergency case basis, obviously veterans in their own rights who are going to continue to be a part of the wide receiver room.
Yep. What else we got here? Oh, Zach Orr was named to the Athletics 50 under 40 list. So the highest rising. Is this players and coaches? Do you know, Bobby?
I don't know who voted on this, but congrats, man. He's 32. I mean, this guy.
No, I don't mean who voted. I mean, it's the Athletic put it together, but I mean, is the list players and coaches?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. The Ravens tweeted this out. I saw it yesterday, and obviously we heard Chuck Pagano's complimentary feedback of the way that Zach's been cultivating his new staff. Saying that he's been doing a great job teaching us, doing a great job of myself. When 64-year-old Chuck Pagano is speaking about a 32-year-old in Zach, those comments certainly hold weight. So. Congratulations to him getting ready for year 2 as the defensive play caller in Baltimore.
It's just coaches. I looked it up.
Gotcha.
He's 32.
Yeah. He's going to be a future head coach.
He's going to be a head coach.
Future head coach. And one more quick hit.
Oh, so Garrett, who I'm sure many of you guys follow on Twitter. He's a big Twitter name. He listened to our kind of miniature debate with Femi Ayambadejo. And obviously I said that I'm okay if the Ravens want to retain him. I think business-wise, the money is separate from how he's been playing. But if they do retain him, I'm not going to him in clutch moments. I'm not going to him with the game on the line. And Femi was arguing against that idea. And so Garrett said, Sarah, this would have been a great sample size for the Mark Andrews discussion on your latest podcast episode. And then he sent me a tweet he put out a while ago. Here's what Mark Andrews has done in 8 playoff games. He's averaged 40 yards per game. He's had 0 touchdowns, 1 fumble, and 8 drops. Those drops are according to PFF. Drops are a very subjective stat. You have to decide, was that on you? Was it an actual drop? Should you have caught that? Or was that just an incompletion? And so that 8 drops includes the drop pass for 2-point conversion. So, I felt like Femi was like, you got to give him another chance. If he did it again, to me, it's already happened enough. This isn't like it was Mark's first time. So it's not just that he hasn't come up in playoffs, but he's had those 8 drops. And then there are other games like the Steelers game when I feel like they went to him on a 2-point conversion, or it was a touchdown, but they were at the goal line. They threw it to him and he didn't catch that either. So good info here from Garrett. So I appreciate him reaching out.
Yeah, Garrett Sprints. You can find him on X, and Blake Yaspa and No Way DJ. We appreciate you guys for being supporters of ours through the Vault Patreon community. We thank you for your support, and this is your monthly shout out. So thanks to you guys. If you guys are interested in doing the same out there and supporting the channel, we have a pinned comment right now in the live chat. And you can also find the link in the show notes where you can support the show for as little as $1.99. We do this year round. It's daily live content. We love that you guys are here, and patreon.com/RavensVault podcast is where you can learn more.
I have one more quick hit, and just people are saying that the Steelers, when I was talking about, was regular season. That's correct. I was pointing out the playoff stuff, but also in the regular season against the Steelers, when the game was on the line, he didn't come through. So I was talking about both. I'm talking about both. To me, whether it's the playoffs or the regular season, if the game is on the line, Mark Andrews is not the first number that I call. And then one more quick hit. Somebody had posted this footage of Wiggins in high school. And they said, look at Wiggins running like a robot. So he gets a pick 6 from end zone to end zone. Check this out, Bobby. So they throw over to him. He tips it to himself, leaps up and catches it. And then look at his form. Look at his form. You know what he looks like? He looks like Forrest Gump for Alabama, where it's just like straight.
It's Forrest Gump on the highway, like going cross country, right? Foot fire.
I gotta watch this again. Tip to himself. Look at the ball skills, following the ball in the air, and then he's just like, woof, 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 woof.
This dude.
And he runs the 100 yards really quick. I'm like, how did he get from one end zone to the other? And does he even need to like catch his breath?
I love it.
That's pretty good.
What, it took him till the end of the season to get that first pick 6. So I'd imagine there's going to be plenty more for number 2 when he takes those risks and he has that kind of savvy when it comes to his ball skills. But I love it. That's a bright spot. Certainly a bright spot in the secondary moving forward for him. We appreciate you guys for hanging out with us on this Thursday. We have a 1:30 meeting on business stuff. So no, crazy. When's the last time we did a live stream under 60 minutes, even though it's 9 minutes past 1 o'clock? We actually are south of 60 minutes. We did it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. But like the video on your way out, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we're dropping our daily live content. You can pretty much ensure that we'll have some clips, I'm sure, from Daniel Jeremiah's conference call and anything Ravens related coming up and for tomorrow's show. So for Sarah Ellison, I'm Bobby Trossett signing off from this Thursday show. We will catch up with you in under 23 hours from right now on the Friday edition here inside the Vault. And as always, thanks for spending some time with us. We'll catch up with you tomorrow.